There are bones in Westminster Abbey. Inside a white marble urn designed by Christopher Wren in 1678. The inscription says they belong to Edward V and his brother Richard, Duke of York, the two sons of King Edward IV of England, the ones who entered the Tower of London in 1483 and never came out. That urn has been there for over 300 years. In the 1970s, when ancient dinar analysis first became technically possible, several researchers asked for the bones to be tested. The royal family said no. They and #39V asked again since. Multiple times. The royal family has kept saying no. The bones are there. The technology to test them exists. The mystery, England and #39's greatest unsolved crime, has been waiting 540 years for an answer, and the answer might be in that urn. Act 1. The summer of 1483, Edward IV died in April 1483. He was 40 years old. His death was unexpected. He left two sons. Edward, 12, and Richard, 9. The elder was heir to the throne. And he left a problem. Edward IV had named his younger brother Richard, Duke of Gloucester, as protector of the realm until his son was old enough to rule. Richard of Gloucester was a man in his 30s. Reputation, capable soldier. By all accounts, loyal to his brother throughout his life. Young Edward V was travelling from Ludlow in Wales to London for his coronation. His uncle intercepted him on the road. There are different versions of what happened at that meeting. What an Act 39's documented is this. His uncle arrested the man accompanying the boy, his maternal uncle, Anthony Woodville, and took personal charge of the King and Act 39, his journey to London. The boy arrived in the capital. They installed him in the royal apartments of the Tower of London, which at the time was not a prison, but the palace where kings waited before their coronation. A few weeks later, the younger brother Richard of York also arrived. His mother had kept him sheltered in Westminster Abbey. The royal council persuaded her that the boy should be with his brother before the coronation. That was June 1483. Both boys entered the tower. From that point, contemporary witnesses saw them less and less. Then, nothing. There's no record of when they died. There's also no record of them being killed. There's silence. And in 1483, silence was enough for the world to start telling whatever story suited it best. Act 2. How Shakespeare killed an innocent man on July 6, 1483. Richard of Gloucester was crowned King of England. He became Richard III. The official reason was that his parents and #39 marriage had been invalid, making the boys illegitimate and without a claim to the throne. Many accepted it. Others didn't and #39T. Richard III reigned for 2 years. Then he died at Bosworth, as you know if you watched our episode about his skeleton beneath the Leicester parking lot. The man who killed him at Bosworth was Henry Tudor. He became Henry VII, and to legitimise himself, Henry Tudor needed one thing: for Richard III to be a monster. So the machinery started. Thomas More wrote that Richard was hunchbacked, evil, that he had murdered his nephews. More was 5 years old when Richard III died. He wrote that decades later, citing sources he never named. And then came Shakespeare. Shakespearean's play about Richard III premiered sometime in the 1590s. 100 years after the events. Shakespearean's Richard murders without hesitation, lies without blinking, and confesses everything to the audience with a smile. His hunchback is the outward sign of his inner evil. It's a brilliant character, one of the best Shakespeare ever wrote, and it's almost certainly a fabrication. The same forensic analysis that found his skeleton beneath the Leicester parking lot confirmed he had scoliosis, a real, significant spinal curvature. Not Shakespearean's monstrous hunchback. That's not a minor detail. If the chroniclers exaggerated his physical deformity to make him more threatening, what else did they exaggerate? The chronicles contemporary with Richard III and Hack 39's reign, written by people who knew him or lived under his rule, are noticeably more ambiguous than Moore or Shakespeare. The Croyland Chronicle mentions rumours about the princes in Hack 39 deaths, but doesn't in Hack 39 directly accuse Richard. No 15th century document names Richard III as the murderer of his nephews with any direct evidence. Not one. Act 3. The Bones in the Tower. In July 1674, almost 200 years after the princes disappeared, workers doing renovations in the Tower of London found something beneath a staircase. Bones, children's bones according to the doctors of the time. King Charles II ordered them examined. 17th century physicians identified them as the princes' remains based on their size and approximate age. The king had them buried in Westminster Abbey. In 1678, Christopher Wren designed the urn where they rest, a white marble piece with an inscription explicitly identifying them as Edward V and Richard, Duke of York. The decision was political, the identification an assumption. Nobody analysed them with scientific methods. The methods didn't exist. In 1933, a team of two experts, archaeologist Lawrence Tanner and anatomist William Wright, examined the bones for the first time with modern techniques. Their conclusions: the bones appeared to be those of two children, one about 12 years old and one about 10, compatible with the princes' ages in 1483. They also found dried blood on one of the skulls, and bones with marks that might indicate violence. But the analysis was superficial. They didn't have access to all the pieces. And 1933 technology was very limited. When DNA analysis started developing in the 1980s and 90s, several organisations and academics asked for the bones in the urn to be tested. The Dean of Westminster consulted the royal family. The answer was no. The official reason: the bones were the remains of a royal person, deserving the same respect as any other member of the royal family, and disturbing them for scientific purposes was inappropriate. It's a legitimate reason. It's also the reason that prevented anyone from knowing for 50 years whether those bones are really the prince's. Or anyone else. Act 4, 10 years searching for the truth in 2013, Philippa Langley found Richard III's skeleton beneath a Leicester parking lot. Same person, same hunch, same ability to be right when almost everyone thought she was wrong. After that, Langley launched another project. Longer, more complicated. The Missing Princes Project. For 10 years, a team of over 300 researchers across several countries reviewed medieval archives nobody had examined with forensic eyes. They weren't an #39, just looking for evidence of the princes and Hack 39 deaths. They were looking for evidence that they survived. And they found things. In the Gelderland archives, in the Netherlands, they found a 15th century manuscript referencing two young Englishmen of royal blood living on the continent in the years after 1483. In Lille, a payment receipt to, and quote, the sons of Edward of England, and quote, from a date after they were supposed to be dead. In Nuremberg, letters mentioning a young Englishman claiming royal lineage in the 1490s. None of these documents proves, beyond doubt, that the princes survived. What they do is create a pattern of evidence the traditional story can't explain. Langley published her conclusions in May 2025. The Princes in the Tower: How History's Greatest Cold Case Was Solved. Her thesis, Edward V and Richard of York survived Richard III's reign. They left the Tower. They lived, at least for a time, in continental Europe. And the story that Richard killed them was a Tudor fabrication to legitimise Henry VII. It's a debated thesis. Some historians reject it. Others have been saying the same thing for years. What doesn't exist, whatever thesis you defend, is direct evidence that Richard III killed them. That has never existed. Act 5. The urn that stays closed meanwhile, the bones are still there. In their white marble urn, with Christopher Wren's inscription identifying them as Edward V and Richard, Duke of York. Nobody knows if that identification is correct. Nobody can know, as long as the bones aren't tested. The technology exists. The same team that identified Richard III with 999% probability is the same one that analysed the bones of Caspar Hauser, the Viking warriors of Estonia, the daughters of Tutankhamun. If the bones in the urn could be accessed, mitochondrial DNA could be extracted. It could be compared with living descendants of Edward IV through the maternal line. There are identified candidates, with verified family trees. In weeks, maybe less, it would be known whether those bones belonged to the princes. In 2023, after the Channel 4 documentary and Langley's work, the requests came again. The Dean of Westminster received them, considered them, and rejected them. The reason? The remains are under the custody of the sovereign, the British royal family. His Majesty King Charles III has ultimate authority to authorise or deny the analysis. So far, the answer is still no. There are theories about why. One is the simplest. The royal family has a policy of not disturbing deceased royals, remains, and that policy applies here as it would in any other case. Another is more uncomfortable. If the bones turned out not to be the princes, the 500-year official narrative about Richard III and about Tudor legitimacy would collapse. And the current royal family descends from the Tudors. That connection is real. What each person makes of it is their own business. In 2025, several academics and the Richard III Society explored whether a court order could compel the analysis. The legal answer was complicated. The bones are technically under Crown custody, and the Crown has sovereign immunity in matters of this kind. The legal path for now is closed. The bones are still in the urn. Closing. The unsolved crime here ends what we know for certain. In 1483, 2 boys entered the Tower of London and disappeared. They were 12 and 9 years old. For 500 years, the world assumed Richard III killed them, based on an accusation with no direct evidence, amplified by a playwright born 30 years after the fact. In 2025, 10 years of forensic investigation published documentary evidence that they might have survived. The evidence is indirect, Ittenhack 39S debated. But it exists. And in Westminster Abbey there are bones that could settle the debate in weeks. They, not dead, in the sense that their story is still alive. What's dead is the possibility of knowing. Blocked in an urn, the royal family could change that tomorrow morning. They spent 50 years not doing it. And meanwhile, the oldest question in English criminal history stays where it always was. Unanswered, every bloodline tells the truth. When someone lets it speak,